Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Joe and Chapz Takeover for That Millwall podcast. Today we have a special guest on the show. Welcome to the show, Benjamin.
How are we doing, guys? Normally I have the best hair on whatever show I'm on, but I'm feeling a bit, I'm feeling a bit down on the hair stakes here because your two is both pretty impressive, I have to say.
I actually thought I was on a bad hair day earlier until I saw you, Ben. So I feel all right now, actually. But I do love the blue setting in the background. I love that Millwall theme that you got going on there.
And just before you went on, I got a couple of people to just smoke a cigarette in here illegally. just
in your toilet,
feel like the toilet's in the Barry Kitchener, yeah?
People always say, before we continue, that secretly you're like a Mill's like your second team. You certainly got a soft spot for us. You seem to sort of be really good to us. Is there any kind of truth in that? I mean, do you sort of have a special kind of affiliation with us, or?
What I would say is football fans are like single men who, like if a woman just looks, she's interested in me, she fancies me. So look, I had a great time so it would have been a 17-18 season. Millwall always seemed to be on a night that I could go. So I would go and cover them. The team was really good. You finished 8th, went on a great run. I was building the YouTube channel all the time and worked out. I try and be completely impartial. Obviously, I'm an Ipswich fan, so they're my team. They'll always be my team. In terms of soft spots, and I would say there's no other club like Millwall, is there? In terms of the kind of the way the fan philosophy reflects to the area of the club, reflects to the ownership, reflects to the pitch. I think that's more joined up than you get at most clubs, and I think that makes it pretty cool. And I also just like the fact that people think Millwall fans are horrible, and they're perfectly lovely to me. I'll always go to bat for them in that regard. So yeah,
that's really kind. Thanks for those words. Really nice.
No, amazing, and thank you again for joining, Ben. And I will admit, and I said I wouldn't say this on air, but I am. I've been a massive fan of your channel for years, so I've been really particularly excited for this. And for those of you that don't know, Ben's channel is the Benjamin Bloom Football Channel, and he's got all sorts of content on there, from pre-match predictions with various different fans, and also the likes of Joby McAnuff, etc., have been on there. I've noticed, Ben, stadium rankings, match reviews, one-off reviews. So loads of great content. So please do go and check his channel out. Joe, my sort of co-host, how are you doing, mate? You looking forward to this one?
I'm good. I mean, I'm always excited when we're on here, but I'm especially excited today. To be here with Benjamin, of course. Yeah, Benjamin is a legend in what he does, and his growth, his profile is building every season, and it won't be too long before we see him as a regular on Sky Sports panel. I'm sure, he's going to go far. So watch this space, and I'm sure in a not too distant future he'll be going places. So thanks again, Benjamin. We really appreciate you joining us this one.
It's really kind, and I do appreciate the nice words. I'll always say I've not played, I've not managed, I've not been in the dressing room. I'm just a fan like you guys with an opinion who jumped on the YouTube. It's very humbling when people are willing to. You probably have the same experience. People are willing to listen to what you've said. None of us profess to know any more than a pro who's played. I've just been speaking to Jamie Mackey for the predictions this morning, and you kind of think if people like that who've played hundreds of games of football, they just see it on a different level than we do. But what us fans can bring is the passion and how much we care, and nobody can match that, can they?
Absolutely. I guess it's a different perspective as well. If you're a player, you're on the pitch, you don't really see it. Whereas us as a spectator, you're there, you're analysing everything that goes on. They're not aware of what goes on across the whole pitch, are they? They kind of focus on their game.
As well, some of them, especially in the modern era, from, 10, 12, these guys are playing every weekend at age group level. They've never been a fan. Their entire life, they've been in this competitive, so hard to get to the top. So yeah, it's a completely different angle from. But don't get me wrong, some some players you'll hear were on the terraces right the way going through, and you see Alan Shearer being a ball boy or whatever at Newcastle, But yeah, it's just a different slant that we bring here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a great show lined up today. We're going to talk about 3 specific topics. So the first one we're going to sort of quiz Ben on is our sort of Millwall's evolution under Gary Rowett. So, kind of the 3-year plan and sort of where we've come up to now in Gary Rowett's reign. Then we're going to talk about the elephant in the room, the last 2 games of the season, the playoff, the race for the playoffs, and how we think that's going to shape up. And then finally, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, kind of like what's next for Millwall? What will the championship look like next season? Obviously, Ben has first-hand experience of his team being in League One and looking like they're going to come up.
Stop it.
So would be great to talk about that. So that's kind of
we're not talking about that until it's confirmed. if and when that does indeed happen, maybe on Saturday.
Well, fingers crossed for you, mate. So, what have you made then of Gary Rowett's reign? Just coming up to sort of, as I say, his sort of 3-year plan, which he said he wanted to sort of be in and around and challenging for those playoff places. So, what have you made of his sort of tenure so far?
Can I just ask one question before I answer? How long is his contract?
So it's Millwall keep contracts and things very, very hush-hush.
They do, don't they? Yeah.
And I think if you ask loads of different Millwall fans, they'll probably tell you different things. And I don't have any prior knowledge, but I'm not sure it's even not a rolling thing, to be perfectly honest. I actually don't know whether they could even part ways at the end of this season. I don't know.
He signed an extension. Was it a year ago? I think, wasn't it, on his contract? So it must have been up for renewal. I know that was extended, but I'm not too sure how long for. You would have hoped to be a 2-year or 3-year, but it
Joe,
could be a rolling year one. Yeah.
The wording at the time, and it's very subtle, but it wasn't. I don't think it was called an extension. I think it was called agreed new terms.
Right. Okay.
And if you look at the wording in the article, so it doesn't say he signed, like Millwall often come out and say, they've signed a new long-term deal. And all that really means it's probably 2 and a bit years.
Yeah,
so
6 months.
Ultimately, I don't think we know, but
yeah.
No, but I mean, that's just an interesting wrinkle to it. And so often now, like you say, people have a year option on the end of normally a 3-year deal, so to speak. But so in terms of the sort of long game with Rowett, excuse me, very unprofessional. Do not drink Diet Coke and try and talk at the same time. In terms of the long game, so it was always an interesting kind of transition to begin with, because obviously Neil Harris had something, in terms of being a club legend that makes it a hard act to follow. And fans will then process the next manager in a different way. As I said in the previous answer, Millwall's very unique. So something a manager of Millwall has to do is get it. And I can't explain that in any more sort of explicit terms than you have to understand what it is you're managing in terms of the culture of the club. So I think he ticked that box in terms of having, let's just say, let's call Millwall disruptive as a club in a very complimentary way, and in terms of going away and making yourself hard to beat is kind of very Millwall, isn't it? It's like, here's 2 fingers up to you in United Stadium. We're going to come and beat you 1-0, and Jeb Wallace is going to smash a free kick in from 30 yards, and you're not going to know quite how, but we're going to lead with all the points. So that kind of worked in a different way, because Neil Harris's approach to being disruptive was, no, we're going to play 4-4-2. We're going to run all over you. We're going to be nice and direct. The ball's going to be in play really quickly, because we're going to play all the restarts real fast, and we're going to make you defend. And if you're better than us, fine, have your 3 points, but we're going to make it blooming hard for you. And Gary Rowett's come at the same kind of thing in a different way. I know and I understand the Millwall fans probably prefer up and at 'em to I'm gonna sit here and make life hard for you. I get that. What I would say is, in terms of budget and hierarchy, which I know you probably get so bored of talking about, but it is the Championship and there are those cliff edges all the way down. I understand why Gary Rowett plays it in the way he does. But let's be honest, he was like that at Birmingham. He was like that at Derby. He was like that at Stoke. It's not like Gary Rowett became a defensive manager when he walked into Millwall. He was already like that. So I think he's done a good job, and you almost deserve I've said this before on, talking about Millwall, you almost deserve over the entirety of being in the Championship to have got into the playoffs at least once. Just on the whole body of work. And I think everybody just wants to see a home leg at the Den in the playoffs, because it would just be great, won't it? I just want to see the away players going. If you go there and win in the playoffs, fair play, well done, because that will be hostile as anything in the best way. Because I love it as a fan going there, just the noise and the the hostility and how players stand up to it, because they either sink or swim, don't they? So I know it's a bit split in your fan base. I know some of the fans would like to see going on the offensive on the pitch a bit more, in terms of being 10 metres further up and being a bit more aggressive in the attacking sense. But I think he's done a good job. I think hierarchy-wise, for Millwall to get in the playoffs, basically, they need a couple of the parachute teams to cock it up, don't they? They need to have a good season recruitment-wise, injury-wise, maybe for a couple of others to be under par. And I don't mean to be patronising to Millwall, but we all know if Middlesbrough perform, if Stoke perform, if all of the parachute teams perform, Bristol City perform, you know what I'm saying? Millwall kind of get bumped down if they don't punch their weight. It's a very long-winded answer to say. I think he's done quite well.
A really good answer. Really good answer.
And I would agree with that. I think the football is a results-based business, and I think you take away the last sort of few weeks where results and performances haven't been great, but you look on you just take a step back and look at the facts. I don't think you could argue that Gary Rowett has done a good job in that regard. I guess it's a classic case of what's got us here, can it get us there? And to your point around us not making the playoffs yet, is Gary Rowett the right man to get us there?
And it depends on. It does depend on what others do as well. I think when you play that style, and let's look at the examples of other teams who have got in there. Okay, maybe Huddersfield last season were quite stoic, quite good on set plays, good at defending the lead. So, do you know what? Maybe that tactic is fine. I'm just thinking of Sheffield United, who were really quite innovative and quite brave, weren't they, to finish second? And the team that you guys are constantly going to be compared with now is Luton. And they're a little bit more... I know you played out a 0-0 and they almost sat back in the same way and said, do you know what, we'll take a point from this one. I think you guys you'll have been at the game, you'll have far more knowledge of it than I. But I think those tactics can work. Do you know what, though? The big worry I had was Millwall are going to get to a certain point and they're going to sell Jake Cooper and Jed Wallace, and they're going to do what Ipswich did, essentially, and go, oh, you know what, I'm not going to go toe-to-toe with... with Stoke or whoever paying ex-Premier League player 3 million quid a year or whatever to play in the Championship. And I would have understood that. But what I've really liked is, and it was a mistake for Wallace to not bring in a transfer fee. I know they got good money for George Saville back in the day. But what I have liked is, well, okay, no, we're not just going to sink down. Here comes... Fleming and Vogelsammer and Styles was one I've really liked at But I really like Shackleton actually at Leeds. You know, these are players that when they were at other clubs, I was sort of, these players could really do something. So I think there's a lot of it that's pointing really nicely in the right direction. But I'll caveat all of that in the current system, with the broadcast money distributed how it is, it needs to be like a perfect storm for Millwall, Luton, whoever, to get all that. I'd love to see it. Absolutely would love to see Millwall, Luton, whoever, you know, the teams that always get mentioned. Even Preston or someone like, you'd love to see him get right through and, okay, they probably scored 25 points in the Premier League, but bank that money and then you're the kings when you come back down, yeah?
That's right, absolutely. The interesting point that you mentioned about us punching, and we are punching above our weight, and I think we've also, a lot of our fans, I think, there's a section of fans that are quite honest and will admit that we are punching above our weight. We've got one of the lowest wage budgets, transfer budgets in the league. So really, you think about where we're positioned at the moment, we're quite fortunate. However, you know, there are some sort of Millwall fans there that believe that we should be doing better, or we should be aiming hard at the pitch. And, you know, like you said, we should be playing up and at, a bit more attacking. But you can't help but feel, if we were playing the Neil Harris way, could we be fighting relegation at the moment rather than fighting for a playoff place? And maybe tactically, like you say, Rowett's probably created this kind of defensive, counter-attacking type of football that has probably got us where we are now. You know, we can't really be too, you know, despondent by that and complain too much by it, really, you know.
And that's the beauty of the debate, because you can't tell those people that they're wrong, because we haven't lived out an existence where you have played with these players on the front foot. It's a great debate. You'll never know. In the reality that we do live in, you're doing pretty well. You know, might you have finished in the playoffs before? Maybe. But, you know, right. we don't know. Forgive my Millwall history. I do feel, was there one season where I thought, was it the 1921? Yeah, so I just got the table up there, where Swansea snuck in on the very last day, didn't they? That huge turnaround against...
They did,
yeah, and you kind of would have thought, you know, that because Wallace was there and Cooper was 2 years younger, and it looked like, I don't know whether the naysayer fans, I'm not saying they're wrong, but whether they've got a point there for that particular season.
Possibly, because I guess where you are, you always want to try and better yourself the season after. You don't want to go backwards, do you? So you think you want to try and reinvest, and like you touched on earlier about recruitment being important. I think for us, as much as we try to ignore it, we try to forget about it, and it's yesterday's news, but Jed Wallace leaving and going to West Brom is probably the difference for us, you know, being a team that could make the playoffs quite comfortably this season and be in a position where we are at the moment. I mean, what he's doing for West Brom, he's done for us over the last sort of 3 or 4 seasons. Even this season, I think he scored 5 or 6 goals for them. Maybe got 8 or 9 assists for them. They seem to love him. The fans are really warm to him. And although I'm really pleased with the signing of Zian Fleming, who I think is a player we desperately needed, who plays that number 10 role for us, we do lack that kind of attacking contribution, if you like, from the wide areas. And Jed Wallace used to give us that in abundance. So, you know, I know it's, you know, a bit like yesterday's news now. You've got to kind of move forward, but I can't help but feel if we kept on with Jed Wallace, kept him, adding Zian Fleming, we could have a real good go at this season. I'm not saying we're going to be in top 2, but certainly we'll probably be in positions where, say, Luton is or Middlesbrough are at the moment. So recruitment is imperative, isn't it? And how you sort of select your players in and get the right sort of the right balance, I suppose, you know?
So the only thing I would say about that is, and this is where we'll find out whether Gary Rowett is a top championship manager or a middling championship manager, is you just wonder whether would it matter if he had 3 or 4 super attacking talents? Would he still play through one of them? Because something in my brain says, would they, you know, would they both get equal output under him? Would he adapt? I mean, we don't want to patronise someone who obviously knows way more about, probably forgotten more about football than the 3 of us, you know, will ever know. But you do see that pattern of, you know, okay, Wallace was there and everything went through Wallace, and Fleming's there, and okay, Bradshaw gets goals as well. But you know, you would hope he would evolve to enjoy those 2 players at the same time. And So I was just looking, if you're looking at me looking down here as you were talking, and this will be, and I'm kind of debating with myself here, but that's, that's fine to get your head around it. But the Millwall fans who would argue that probably Luton, Coventry, and Sunderland. Coventry and Sunderland have been in League One lately as of Millwall past 5 years. Luton have been even lower, are all in there at the moment. Last season, Huddersfield got in there, Luton got in there. Previous season, Barnsley got in there. So that would be a good counter argument to say, if I were a Millwall fan saying, no, why not? We could have got in there. It's hard, if you're trying to be balanced about it, but it's hard to argue, well, Barnsley got in there,
And I think one of the things that just to sort of the clubs you mentioned there, sort of your Lutons, your Coventrys, your Sunderlands, I think their recruitment over the last couple of years has been fantastic and it's very, very different. So Sunderland have a really specific recruitment model around age and looking at players of certain age groups. Coventry have kind of, invested into, the likes of Gustavo Hamer and Gyökeres and paid a little bit of money, but they similar
to what you've done with Fleming, isn't it?
Yeah, you kind of have to you sort of take a punt, build a star, and then hopefully sell them on for a lot more, and then buy one or two more stars, right? And then of course Luton, they basically signed Barnsley's old strike force, and have made some other really. They've made good use of the loan market this season.
Very clever with older players as well, Luton, aren't they?
Yeah. So I guess the point I'm trying to make there is I think Fleming was a great signing, and I think he was needed with Jed going. But the consistency of good recruitment over the last sort of 2, 3, 4 sort of transfer windows for those clubs, I think is a little bit of a difference to where we are at the moment.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I always have these conversations with people, and what my club needs to do is use the Brentford model. And I'm like, well, yeah. And I would also like to use this diet and workout model. And, then look at me. But it's easier said than done sometimes. And, you look at the clubs that just get their recruitment right over and over and over again and amp it up and amp it up. And yeah, okay, Brentford did. And then in the background there, you have got a very, very wealthy owner at Brentford. I know they did it the right way, but it's tough. It's really, really tough. And again, I don't want to go sound like some socialist ranter or whatever, but it would be lovely if clubs like Millwall and Luton and Coventry were rewarded, and it wasn't just that. And I love what Sheffield United did in 2019, but after Tuesday night, 7 of the last 8 automatic promotion teams now in the Championship have been receiving parachute payments.
That's a fact for you. That's a stat. So that's probably a nice segue as well for us to move on to promotion from the Championship. So obviously we now know at time of recording that Burnley and Sheffield United are up in the top 2 and probably deservedly so over the course of the season. I think no one could argue really with those two. Middlesbrough and Luton all but confirmed. They may even be confirmed at this state. I'm not sure in terms of being in the playoffs. And then you've got take you all the way down to Swansea perhaps. And I enjoyed your video the other day, Ben, where you were sort of talking about what needs to be true for those things to happen. So
Chris, I knew less about it after making that video than I did before.
Well, so yeah, it's going to go to the wire, I would imagine. And I think from a selfish Millwall stance, we've got an opportunity on Friday to put the pressure on other teams by going to Blackpool and taking 3 points. We're not in the best of form, but not to necessarily put you on the spot, but also put you on the spot, Ben. For those that haven't seen your video, how do you kind of see it shaping up?
So I'm going to talk in broad terms because I'll just make a fool out of myself. We're literally trying to do the predictions just a minute ago for the weekend, and you're almost going, well, I'll try and do Cardiff, but the second Cardiff play at Rotherham tonight, the landscape changes. That changes the game against Huddersfield. And then you're looking at Luton Blackburn on Monday, and you're like, well, how will Luton play this? Well, there's going to be a load of more games before that, and We've already seen Middlesbrough start resting some players and playing along. So will Luton follow suit? Does that then help Blackburn go in? Do Luton go full throttle at Blackburn, which would hinder Blackburn? And there's so many variables. So the broad things we know, I mean, look at it really simplistically. Are Millwall better than Blackpool? Yes, they are. Should Millwall beat Blackpool? They probably should. Are Millwall in good form at the moment? No. Blackpool are hanging on in there. What we do know is that, contrary to what people think, it's a bit of a myth that, and we were saying this before we went on air, that people swap places on the last day. The high ground is so important, because when things break down to chaos on the last day and we're all on our phones working out the league tables because someone took the lead after 5 minutes or whatever, often it just comes back round over the entirety of that 90 minutes, and whoever's got the higher ground kind of stays in there. So I think Millwall have to beat Blackpool if they want to stay in there, get up. On that last day, again, Coventry go to Middlesbrough, but are they going to be playing Middlesbrough reserves? We don't know the context of all these things. Will Luton have beat Blackburn? And then that could completely take the edge off Blackburn for your last game against them. So all I would say is I think you have to beat Blackpool, and once it goes down to the chaos of the last day, and don't get me wrong, I'm very militant about people using the word lottery. It's not a lottery the last day of the season. Neither are the playoffs, and neither are penalty shootouts, by the way, while I'm ranting about these things. But you do want to have the higher ground when it all breaks down on that last day. And I also think you want to be at home on the last day, and you are. So a few things go in your favour. What do you guys think?
I mean, me personally, I did a quick sort of calculation how I thought it would go, and I was quite honest. I think we're going to struggle against Blackpool. They are fighting for their lives. Obviously, mathematically, they can still stay up, so they need to win against us to stand any chance of survival. If we beat them, I think they're technically relegated, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so I think they're going to go at it, and similar to how we play against Wigan, really. I think they're going to be more up for it than we are. I don't know why, but it's just how it's been lately. We're in bad form. So I can see them beating us. I can then see us, weirdly, beating Blackburn last game of the season. But what I would say is that I do think the teams in and around us, especially ones sort of very close, even above us, will probably slip up somewhere along the line. I mean, I don't see... For example, I don't see Swansea slipping up. I think they'll get all 6 points in the next two games. They've got to play against Hull away, which I think they'll win quite easily. And they've got West Brom at home. West Brom a little bit hit and miss at the moment as well. So I can see them win, but it'll be too late for Swansea, unfortunately. So I think they will, although they'll get quite a high, I think they'll probably finish 7th or 8th. I think unless we beat Blackpool, we've got no chance. Because even if we win against Blackburn, Sunderland and Coventry will pick up points, and they will keep their places in 5th and 6th spot. And we'll probably narrowly miss out by a point, is how I kind of calculated it. So, to your point there, I think we really need to beat Blackpool to stand any chance of going to the last game. If we lose this one, that's it. It's over.
Yeah, and even though it looks like it's a low tide, doesn't it? Because you're talking about Millwall finishing on 68. Yeah, Coventry could... It just depends what Middlesbrough do on that last day of the season, but they could be going into it with 69. I think they've got Birmingham at home, which is an all right fixture, and Sunderland have got Watford at home. And, if Watford had no intensity when they could make the playoffs, what are they going to be like now they can't make them? Hey, look, they'll probably win 4-0 now, Watford, won't they? all their expensive players will probably show up and play beautifully, won't they? And,
with no pressure. Yeah, you're right. It's true.
There's a lot of head-to-heads as well, Joe, isn't there? There's Norwich, West Brom. I believe Preston have to go to Sheffield United. I'm trying to remember all the fixtures. Yeah, so many permutations.
Yeah, so Preston plays Sheffield United. Then I think Preston then play at home to Sunderland. And again, I can see the last one there, Preston Sunderland being a 0-0 draw. Preston are quite sort of strong defensively. Sunderland They don't score.
I reckon if Sunderland can get in the playoffs, I reckon over 50% of that stadium will be Sunderland fans on that last day. So that could seriously, that could be one of those mad last days where Sunderland just get roared over the line somehow.
Well, when we play them at our ground this season, I mean, we very rarely, as you know, we very rarely give the bottom tier away because we try and keep it very kind of, segregated with the fans, away fans. But they filled up home and away, and they were loud, and they were standing up the whole game.
Oh, Joe, I was at the playoff final when they went up, and I could get any seat I wanted with the Wycombe fans. And then you looked around at the Sunderland, and I think it was 40,000 of them, completely full right up to the top of Wembley. Yeah, brilliant. Incredible fan base, big following, don't they? Yeah. So that can make a difference as well. Like you're saying, Benjamin, that could be so that can help them get across the line as well for them. How about yourself, Chris?
Yeah. So I think if we win, if we get 6 points for the next two games, I think we will be in the playoffs. I still hold that belief because I think someone will slip up, and I think it's so close. I genuinely think that. Do I think we will get the 6 points? The answer to that question is no. So therefore, I don't think we'll end up in the playoffs. What I would say is, barring Swansea, which I'll talk about in a second, I think the top six as it stands now, with Coventry and Sunderland in the top six, is the best six teams in the league, in my opinion.
Can we be very honest about this? Whoever gets in fifth and sixth are not as good as Luton and Middlesbrough. That would be the hot bet to be the final as well. I know it doesn't always work out like that, but it does feel like two at the top, better than everybody else. The next two reasonably close to the top two, but not good enough. And then, like you say, complete wacky races for fifth and sixth.
100%. I would just say, in terms of, from what I have seen, the best of the rest would be Coventry and Sunderland, and I think they've got one or two individuals, and they play a nice style on the eye as well, both of them, which
goals, which helps
exactly, which I appreciate. I also think Swansea they've come from nowhere, and since we've beaten them, I think they've won 5 or 6 on the bounce. And what I find really, really interesting is, I'm sure every Millwall fan watching this has probably spent the last sort of week or so being like, if we'd have just got one more point, we'd be in a different position. But then I think about Swansea, who are 3 points behind us, and we taken 4 points off them this season. We got 2 last 2-minute goals to equalise at their place, and we didn't deserve anything. And then somehow, after they played us off the park, we beat them at home 2-1. And they're probably thinking the same, So that's how fine margins this league is, right? Where, we're like, we should have got something at Hull. We should have got something against Birmingham, Huddersfield. But they'll be feeling equally aggrieved. And I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that it kind of always evens itself out somewhere along the lines. And I think whoever ends up in those sort of 5th and 6th places, it is wacky races. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. And they would have deserved to have got there. So, yes. So none of us, is anyone can we put our neck on the line and just go about 5th and 6th?
I went for one or other of Coventry and Sunderland, and with some very perverse logic, because everything was telling me that Blackburn weren't going to get in. They had the hardest run in. They had a game in hand, but that didn't matter. They've got to go to Millwall on the last day. And Blackburn have been very confusing statistically this season. All their numbers have had them looking like a mid-table team, but then they weren't. And then when their numbers were good, their points dropped off. So they've kind of just done the opposite of everything we thought. So I went for one of Coventry or Sunderland and then Blackburn just for silly reasons. But I totally agree with your analysis, and I'll bow to your superior knowledge of whether Millwall can go to Blackpool and do everything. I think it's a very interesting wrinkle, though, that says if Millwall go to Blackpool and beat them, Blackpool are relegated, aren't they? Which could play into your guys' hands if you can be leading at 30 minutes to go. Panic.
Absolutely, yeah. Like I said, I think, if we win our both games, I truly believe that Coventry and Sunderland will drop points somewhere. So I fancy Coventry to beat Birmingham 2-1. I also fancy Sunderland to win.
You've got scorelines, Chris.
I know.
He's probably got goals for him.
Honestly, I thought really hard about this. I even predicted that Sunderland will beat Watford 2-0 at home. But then the last game of the season, I can just see Preston grinding out a draw against Sunderland as a 0-0. Bit of a tough one there. But I could also see Middlesbrough beating Coventry 1-0.
So Joe, what points total do you think? What is it? 69 makes it your projections?
So on my table, I've got Sunderland with 59. Sorry, Sunderland with 69 points with a plus 12. Coventry 69 with a plus 10.
So you think fifth place will have less than 70? That'd be incredible, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
wow.
That's what I think. Yeah, so I think Sunderland will get 4
last
points.
season. I'm sure we did, and we obviously finished
10-year average, Chris. 74.3. So it is proper.
It goes to show, doesn't it?
Drunk men fighting this season.
Yeah.
It's the points distribution, though, isn't it, across the league, where we're saying
totally right, because of people like Huddersfield winning 3 out of 4 at the bottom. All of a sudden the points go in the bottom, and Burnley beating everybody basically. Yeah,
and Wigan as well, exactly. So I've got Millwall 7th. Literally, I've got us 1 point away from Coventry with a plus 8. Swansea 68 points like Millwall, but they'll be in 8th place. They'll win both the next 2 games with a plus 7. I've got West Brom in 9th, Blackburn in 10th. I think they'll get no points over the next 2 games. Preston with 64 points in 11th, and then Norwich with that 12th spot with 63 points.
Can you just stick even a quid on that? Because if that comes in, you're a genius, and you'll probably win about 10 grand as well. All those, but on every single scoreline, though. Yeah,
every single scoreline as well. Yeah, exactly.
Please gamble responsibly. 18 plus only. BeGambleAware.org. I'm contracted to say.
Yeah. I'm just over 18, so I'm fine. It's okay.
just Joe. So none of us have got Millwall finishing the playoffs then, because I've got Coventry and Blackburn down as mine. I follow the narrative, Ben, really? on Blackburn from your perspective. They've had a tough run of games as well, Blackburn, so I don't think it's true form. And I just think Coventry on their day can beat anyone in the league because of their attacking prowess in the league.
They've got the red hot striker as well. Yeah, you're right.
It does mean that Blackburn then have to beat Luton, and they need to beat us as well.
Yeah, but will Luton rest players is the thing.
I think also,
by the way, sorry, Joe, I've just looked at my 1 to 24, which you can find on my channel. I had Millwall in 8th.
Oh, wow. There you go. So not far off it. I'm saying 7. So exactly, yeah. But no, I think form is important. So I get about resting players, but I think teams need to win. Winning mentality, keeping that fluency going. I think if you drop points or lose games, that could be the difference between possibly not quite bouncing back. So you've got to get the momentum going, winning games. So the last thing I think the players will do is rest players. I mean, what they might do, if they get sort of 1 or 2 goals up, they might take a player off in the 65th minute rather than playing the whole 90 minutes maybe. But I can't see them tinker it too much, I
agree, but I would present in evidence Huddersfield 2017, reserve team for the last 2 games, won the playoffs. Aston Villa 2019, reserve team for the final game.
So it has worked before.
It has worked, and there's 2 examples. I know Villa were stacked, weren't they? Had Grealish, Abraham, and Mings in the Championship, for God's sake. But Huddersfield, you'd think would have needed the momentum,
of course.
And they, German manager, reserve team, and it didn't score a goal, did they? 0-0, own goal, 0-0 in the final. Won the 2 games on penalties.
Wow. Great memory there. Yeah. Brilliant. Well, there you go. That's a good example.
There we go. Well, so none of us have got Millwall finishing in the playoffs, but look, we live in hope. And I genuinely think we beat Blackpool and it's game on. So I think we can all probably agree with that. But the kind of final topic I wanted to just talk through is essentially where do we go from here? What does the summer look like? What do we need to think about? And over the years, Ben, I've liked how you've evolved your model for doing your kind of 1 to 24 at the start of the season. You look at things like consistency of management and parachute payments and all that kind of good stuff. And I think this season the tide is so low because I don't think the quality is as high as it has been. And my personal view is next season is going to be a stronger championship. The teams coming down are going to be stronger.
Who might be coming up from League One, presuming?
Yeah, you know all about that. And then I think you'll have that kind of consistency element where teams that have maybe got into gear a little bit too late this season. But actually form over the last sort of 12 games extrapolated over a full season would put them further up in the table. So I'm looking at teams like even West Brom. I know their form's not great, but over the course of Corberan's reign, it probably is better than where they are now. You've got Norwich would have been sort of better off under their current manager. The likes of Stoke have picked up. Swansea is the classic argument. So you put all those things together and I see a really tough league next year, which makes it even
15
more
15 teams in the top 6, haven't you, when you're doing your predictions? Yeah, I've been there before.
So I just wanted to sort of touch on, what do you think about the league next year? Bit of insight maybe into some unnamed League One teams, shall we say, and what recruitment you think we need.
Well, I'd love to talk about Plymouth. Hey, no, it's so hard to tell. We always use the term moving parts, don't we? There's just so many moving parts. If I were a Millwall fan, the one thing I would cling on to is we know what we're going to get from your chairman, and it's going to be stable. It's not going to be bonkers. You're not going to break FFP and sign 8 loanee strikers from the Premier League on 70 grand a week. So what we can count on is that you will not do anything silly and hold kind of where you are. The problem is that lots of other teams will, and some of them will get it right. And that's always the difficulty, isn't it? And you make a really, really good point as to, so I would broaden it out and say, how does it work specifically for Millwall if you have this drunk men fighting scenario versus, do you remember the 2018-19 season where the standard was really high and you had Sheffield United and Norwich killing it? Bielsa's Leeds couldn't even get in. That Villa team I mentioned with the highest wage bill in the history of the Championship won the playoffs against a Derby team with Mount, Tamori and Wilson in. West Brom had Rodriguez, Gale and Barnes for the first half of the season. And you had teams like Bristol City spending 6 or 7 million quid on a centre-back, Does that work for... I mean, in that example, you'll remember that season. It didn't go well for Millwall. It went even worse for Ipswich, obviously. But you wonder, does that work for Millwall? Or would you almost prefer it to be, everybody drunk, trying to punch each other, all falling over, and, you kind of just walk through the car park to the front of the bar, yeah? I don't know. I really, really don't know. And you also think, who's coming down from the Premier League? Is anybody going to be Fulham? And just they're not even in the conversation because they're so much better than everybody else. And Burnley's a weird example because the reset was so surprising. But will we get? Is one place in the table just not, going to be off limits because someone's going to get relegated and score 95 points or what have you? I would love to see Millwall you'll know more about the accounts than I, double down on what they've done this summer. And, maybe we see some more clever loanees. Maybe we see, it's hard to get it right every time. We pull Fleming out every summer, but I would love to see that. And honestly, I'd have Rowett in situ and keep building. It's very kind that you said about the 1 to 24s. I totally think if your manager was there at the end of season A and is still there at the start of season B, you're more stable than probably 40% of the clubs are going to be, because as well as I do, by the time we get to September international break, you tell me 5 clubs will have sacked their managers. That will have happened. I don't know who they're going to be. One of the relegated clubs, I bet you, someone will come down for the Premier League, probably change their manager in June and then sack them before October. Millwall won't do that. So, I'm talking myself round in circles of 50 different scenarios, but I do think the positive would be your stability, but I'd like to see you double down and go again. How many years you can afford to do that before the FFP bites, I don't know. But what do you think?
Chris?
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think that if it was down to me, I would absolutely ensure that Rowett's here next season. And I think regardless what happens, there's a big need for a recruitment drive over the summer. And I know it's easy to say, and probably every club says it, but with the players the sort of gaps that we have currently, I mean, we've got one central striker, and that's currently, who knows what happens over the summer. So there is a big recruitment kind of drive. I think what we need to try and do is to your point, Ben, over the next sort of few transfer windows, sign more Zian Flemings, players that have got that, maybe a little bit of a gamble, but they have a resale value, and then know when the right time is to cash in on those players, because that is you build a sustainable model, and it is the Brentford model, and it is harder said. It's not as easy.
Hard. Everybody is going to be looking at that, and they've all got the data, they've all got the scouts, and it's so good that you got Fleming. You got to take a bit of a gamble, and you go to the German market, all of a sudden then everyone goes to the German market. If there's one successful player, Portugal, Netherlands, wherever, United States, we thought was going to be the next one. And everyone, like you've just identified the player, haven't you? Young, resale value, doesn't cost you an absolute arm and a leg if you do the right deal. It's so competitive to get those players. Sorry, Chris, carry on.
No, I completely agree. And I think where there could be some value, just using recency, is some of the teams that are going down from the Championship. So my kind of
Will Keane.
Yes, I said that.
This is it. So this is where my mind goes to. So if we say that the playing field was as level as it's been in a long time this season, so the teams at the bottom aren't that much worse than the teams at the top, and there will be some value in some of the players going down. So the likes of Wigan, Will Keane, Callum Lang, Max Power, Jack Watmore, they've all impressed me when I've seen them play this season. Blackpool, we've been rumoured with Jerry Yates, Josh Bowler. I know he's on loan there, but he's not a bad player. What I'm trying to get at is I think there could be some real value, a bit like what Luton did with Barnsley, and look at some of the players that are in the teams that are going down and have a look at it that way. That would be where I would start off. But Joe, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that Ben said about the recruitment, but also the Brentford model. I mean, one thing, me and Chris had a chat with Gary Rowett a couple of months ago. It was, I think, at the Exec Lounge. I had a chat with him, and he was quite surprisingly, he was quite all for it. He kind of made a bit of a kind of remark to say, what if we sold Zian Fleming in a year's time? He said for 8 million. I don't think we'll get 8 million for him, because I think he had a great start to the season, Fleming, and he's kind of telling from
not miles off with that number, though, are you?
No, I think realistically, I think 5 or 6 million is probably worth it at the moment. That's still great when you consider we paid 1.7 million for him. So,
Joe, I always say if you can sell to a parachute team or a Premier League team, it goes up by 20% straight away. That's the one, isn't it?
That's true. So let's say we went with 8 million, and Gary Rowett said to me and Chris, he goes, is a thing out there for you guys. He goes, what if we sold Zian Fleming for say 8 million and bought 4 Zian Flemings? That's what Gary Rowett said to me and Chris, as in, let's spend the money on 4 £1.7 million players. Not necessarily Fleming as in that position, but that kind of quality from overseas.
Joe, you're talking to an Ipswich fan. We had Kieran Dyer, who was the best young central midfielder in the country. Sold him the year before we went up. We signed Gary Croft, John McGreal, Jermaine Wright, and then the absolute coup de grace in February, we signed Marcus Stewart. And I've talked to Kieran Dyer about this, and he says, was I a better player than those 4? Yes, I was. Would I beat those 4 in a 4-on-1 game of football? No, I wouldn't.
Yeah, that's true. Very, very good point. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's proven it works, isn't it? Like I said, we use even Brighton for that matter. How many great, bit of recruitment Brighton have done over the years, and they've sold players for massive amounts of money, and they're very sustainable at the moment. And they're still churning in.
They're kind of the Brentford of the Premier League now,
aren't they? They are. Yeah, but for much bigger margins as well. So what's quite pleasing, as much as I'll be sad to see someone like Zian Fleming go, because you don't want to lose your best players. But a bit like yourself with Kieran Dyer, if you're selling a player, but you're getting 3 or 4 quality players in, that's going to strengthen your squad and make you a bigger team and improve, then I'm all for it. The difficult thing with Millwall over the years I'm probably going back years and years, talking about Tim Cahill, that kind of era, Stephen Reed, Lucas Neal. We've sold players for peanuts, and our sell-on has been really terrible.
Well, and even Wallace going for free recently.
Well, even that for free, exactly.
Yeah,
And that was interesting as well, because again, that kind of putting Gary Rowett in too much. He mentioned about Jed Wallace. We had the option to sell him to Forest, I think, last January, for fairly cheap. And he had a conversation with the chairman. The chairman said, I don't need the money. We don't need to sell it for £1 million, what they're offered. Let's keep and let's give it one more push in the playoffs. So you can see it's a bit of a gamble. It might have paid off for us by kicking Jed, but it didn't, But you're absolutely right. That was a bit of bad business. I think the only bit of business we made that was really good was George Saville. We went to Middlesbrough.
Back,
yeah, that was like 8.5 million.
And he's probably been... Sorry, Joe, just to sort of let Ben know, I think Saville has been probably our player of the season, to be honest. He's been absolutely outstanding this year.
So in the second half of the season in particular, you're right there, Chris. He's been so reliable, so good. He should be the captain, really, I think. But we got a this bit of money and actually bought him back for peanuts. So again, that's a great bit of business there. And like I said, go back to my point, I don't want to lose the Ian Fleming, but it means we can then reinvest that money and bring in 3 or 4 £1.7 million players and do what Kieran died when he left Ipswich and reinvest. Then I'm absolutely all for it, and that might be the difference for us making it on that lot next season.
And youngsters as well. I mean, how many games has Mitchell played now?
He's played a good
100?
Yeah, I mean, he was injured for a little bit recently, but he must have played, 30 odd games a season, I think.
So having a Mitchell and a McNamara, obviously you want an Ndiaye like Sheffield United have got, where your player you've brought through is actually potentially on the balance sheet for 20 million or what have you. But that's the other way, isn't it?
Exactly. We've got another youngster called Romain Esse. I don't know if you've seen much of him.
Yes, we've had the people at ITV are aware as well. Don't worry. I made them aware. I was like, who's that? The size of that guy. Who is that?
Well, he's only sort of 17. I don't think he's quite 18 yet, and he's basically been fast tracked from the under 21s, kind of skipped the under 21s and come straight into our squad. Although he does play for the under 21s, but he's a regular on the bench. He comes on for the last 15, 20 minutes. And he's something we haven't got have previously. He's very creative, very good on the eye, very skillful, very kind of, he's ahead of himself. And at that age, he's so young. But again, Gary Rowett mentioned about him next season playing a big part in our team.
Like 15, 16-year-old that made his debut.
Yeah, Zach Lovelace. That was last year. So Zach Lovelace, again, he was one of our youngest players to play for us, 15, 16 years of age. But due to the kind of loophole with selling it to a Scottish team, we got peanuts for him for the tribunal. So he went to Rangers last season. They signed him on a professional contract at the time.
Yeah.
But again, SA is one for the future. But there's a rumour that there are Premiership clubs looking at him already. Now, whether they actually buy him and then loan him back to us next year, I'm not quite sure. But there's a possibility that he could be on his way this summer. But again, if the money's there, then who are we to?
And you're totally right, because if you talk to any Leeds fan, the best bit of business they did, they sold Jack Clark to Spurs for 10 million. He's only now getting it going again at Sunderland. And they loaned him back, took Ben White on loan. Okay, they had Bielsa as manager, which always helps, doesn't it? But you're totally right. I try and say this to Ipswich fans as well, because without fail, all fans, when their best players are linked with clubs higher up the food chain, and let's be fair, unless you're Real Madrid, somebody is above you in the food chain that is a bigger club that's got more money. You just have to accept there's always someone taller or better looking than you. And you just got to accept that sometimes it's not the worst thing in the world to sell. You just got to build up that trust that the money's going to be reinvested in a sort of sturdy way, I guess.
And with our chairman, I think we know what, as you said, Ben, earlier, we know what we're getting. We will get that reinvestment and have total trust in him. And
it's just, Chris, those rules are just so awful for clubs like Millwall, where what's your average attendance?
It's this season it's gone up. It's about 14,000 now.
But you've got this 13 million quid loss limit, in terms of the rolling FFP sustainability. And, if you're not bringing in mega bucks and, the Premier League are paying 45 million quid to 3 teams every every year. It just stitches up Luton. I know I'm ranting on about it. Luton, Millwall, Luton can't draw any more than 10,000 because it's all the stadium, holds anyway. And he just stitches up these people because obviously John Berylson's very smart, but he'll be looking at it going, push a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. But I don't want to. I know he's never going to turn into Mr. Chansiri or Mel Morris or someone like that. But you've got to be very, very aware of where those limits are, because then all it is one season points deduction, and things turn quickly, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well,
I think.
Yeah, I think we'll sort of bring the show to a conclusion. Really enjoyed the conversation, and just a massive thank you once again, Ben, for coming onto the show today. And for those of you that are listening, please do go and check out Ben's channel, BBFC, over on his channel. It's lots and lots of great content. So thank you very much. And gents, anything for final thoughts before we close out?
I just want to thank Ben as well for myself. I mean, Ben, love watching your stuff. Obviously, we privileged to kind of see your stuff on social media quite regularly. And thanks again for coming on and keep doing what you're doing. We love watching it.
No, pleasure. It'd be lovely to get down to the Den a bit more regularly. I work every Saturday, and I've got my
play us.
Yeah, my daughter. Hey, do you remember the 4-3?
Yes,
yeah. It's a very strange game, which we maybe lucked out a little bit to win, but there was a. And then I remember, was it the next season? You beat us 3-0, and Paul Lambert had just been announced as the manager. And I just remember an absolute howler. And who was it? I think it's Ryan Leonard lobbed one over our keeper who was on safari. In fact, that would have been Bart Bialkowski actually, but
it would have been at the time. Yeah,
he wasn't having his best season then. Let's just say.
Did he play a friendly this season? Beginning of the season, was it a friendly we played this season or one before?
Yeah, it was this season.
Was it this season or the one before? Yeah.
I think it was this season. I can't remember if we won, whether it was a draw, but you guys played us off the park.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, so how the hell have Ipswich got relegated? How they playing division below us when they're playing this well, and then you guys.
The problem is, Joe, that works in pre-season friendlies. There's a certain amount of extra substance needed when you're off to Cheltenham on Tuesday night, or Accrington, Fleetwood, Morecambe. Love and respect all of those clubs, but they will just laugh at you as you're trying to play it out from the back and boot it out of play and push 10 metres up the pitch, and good luck. Yeah.
They're so good on the eye, though. They look so good. They're a good footballing team. I remember just watching and thinking, this team are too good for Division 1. They're better than us.
Better than us.
Yeah.
Better than us.
Yeah. I know what you mean in terms of the patterns of play and stuff, and hopefully that will, assuming they get the job done against Exeter on Saturday, hopefully that will translate in terms of championship, and we'll be able to come with. Yeah. But I'd love to get to. Hey, I'll certainly be there if you're in a playoff semi-final. And I've said for the longest time, I would love to see, particularly if it's the evening game. I know you'd have to finish third or fourth generally to get the evening game at the Den, but I always say when we talk about atmospheres, it was Millwall, Fulham. They turned you over actually at the end of the 17-18 season. Yeah. Is the loudest. That and Birmingham Villa is the loudest I've heard any championship stadium. So I think a playoff game there would be sensational. But best of luck.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, gents. Well, thank you very much. And for those listening, please do like, share, subscribe, all of that jazz. And on to Blackpool.